All right, so this video is going to cover some quick tips on how to write a good summary or how to plan a good summary. Now, we've all written summaries in this class. You've written several summaries so far, but you haven't done this, which is summarize a portion of a novel. We've summarized short stories, and you've done really concentrated summaries of specific parts of a story, but you're trying to summarize an entire portion of a story. And so here's my suggestions of how you do this. The first thing I would do is use the tools that are available to you to help you organize your summary first. If you think about writing a summary, or any piece of writing in general, but let's just start with a summary, your brain has to do two different things. For a summary, your brain has to remember the information that happened in the story, and then your brain has to figure out how do you string all that information together into sentences and maybe paragraphs in a way that would make sense to your reader. And so I would start with taking care of the remembering part, and then as a separate step, do the writing part. And here's how I do it. First rule of thumb is you got to go back and reread portions of your story. Now, do you have to read them super closely? No, probably not, especially if you remember your story and you understood your story. Reread it if you don't, but if you understand it, you don't need to reread it super carefully, but you should go back and flip through and skim through the section of the story that you read. This will help you remember the things that happened. And you might do that, you might skim through the story as you're doing the step I'm about to show here, which is I would make kind of a really informal outline of the events that happen in the story, and then take those events, once you have them all laid out, and then write them into sentences and paragraphs together. And so if you're on this example right here, and for every assignment you do in this path, you're going to have to write a summary. It says write your summary. So if you notice up here, the bulleted list is already selected. This means every time you hit enter, it's going to make a new bullet. The problem with just making a brand new bullet is it looks like it's a separate topic. To make the bullet look like it's part of your summary, tap the tab key on your keyboard. See how now the bullet goes underneath summary. And then you can put your event and detail down there. And as you go on, you can put more events and details until you feel like you're done with whatever section of the text that you just read. Then below that, tap the enter key a few times until that goes away, and then you could just write summary and actually write events as sentences. And you could put all those events and details together. That way your brain, when you're doing this part, can focus just on writing and making sure the writing makes sense, and you don't have to be sitting there trying to remember what happened in the text, because you already get a list of those events right up here. The other thing I would add is that as you're writing your summary, if you include a character's name, you need to explain who they are. Remember that I won't have read your text, and in general, when you write about text, you want to write to an audience where you assume they have not read the thing that you have read, and so you need to give them what's called context or information to explain to them details that would be necessary in order to understand this text. Same with like place in the text. You need to explain it and explain how it relates to the text. Can't just drop names of text. Now, if your character is like in New York City, you can say your characters are in New York City. You can assume a reasonable human being would know what that means. But if your characters are like in a magical castle named like Zoldemort, you probably need to explain what Zoldemort is, because the other people that read your text aren't going to know what that means. So do a little outline first. Use that outline to string your ideas into sentences and paragraphs, and then make sure you provide context and explain details in your story as you write about them so that anyone who reads your summary would be able to understand what you're saying.